We are live. I think we are live now.
Looks like it.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Uh, this is our another Dogspot live today. The topic is interesting. It's also little emotional. So I'm just going to wait for a couple of moments till people join us. Meanwhile, I will just share, post it. Okay, all right. We have people joining in. And before we start our today's live session on it's a sensitive topic for all of us. It's an emotional topic for all of us. Uh, how to deal with the grief of losing pet. So before we start, I would like to read out something for our viewers. Uh, and I guess all the pet owners can connect with with these lines. Hello Sahil, hi Rana, hello Mitali, hello everyone. I hope you can hear all of us. All right. So here it's going to be a little difficult. So please, if we do any mistake, if I make any mistake, please uh, just ignore our mistake for today.
And we may cry, so you will have to deal
Yeah,
with that also, but it's perfectly normal.
yeah. All right. So these lines are related to us, related to our pets. There is an empty space where you used to lay, and a pain in my heart that won't go away. I couldn't have asked for more better friend. You were my faithful companion until the end. Now you're roaming endless fields, forever free to run, listening to the songs of the wind beneath the golden sun. Meet me at the rainbow when the time is right. Run into my arms again, walk me into the light. So this is all about today's live session. When Rana asked me about this topic, we discussed whether we should go ahead with that or not. You guys asked me if I'm ready to go, if I'm ready to host you on this particular topic, because in another 2 days it will be a month since Millie has gone. Millie is my senior dog. Very recent, just few days back I lost her. So I told Rana that I think I can relate to this topic very well, and this live session maybe it may help me. It will definitely help other pet owners also. So instead talking much about it, I'm handing over to Rajvi. Raj is very good friend of mine, and she is a director of Mariwala mental health care unit.
Initiative.
So yeah, so over to you. You please
Thanks,
start
Meera,
with that.
and thank you for being brave enough to talk to me about this today. But before I say anything, it is a hard topic for a lot of us, and I think a lot of us tend to avoid it because it is inevitable in all of our lives. And
Yeah.
earlier so with pets. But before I say anything, if anything upsets you today, please feel free to reach out to the iCall Psychosocial, which is a mental health helpline, um, and they will answer your calls and listen to your concerns. So don't hesitate to do that. There is a number up on the screen, or if you prefer to write about it, there is also an email. This may bring up memories of losses that can always hurt still. There is no timeline for grief, really. So just be aware of that. And the numbers will be up for a while. So, okay, before now, I mean, like I said, uh, we may start crying, you may cry. It's perfectly routine to feel that way, because losing a pet is a very, I should say, different experience from losing a human, and they're different in two important ways. One
Yeah.
is the ways in which our bonds are built with our companion animals or our pets, and two, the grief that we allow ourselves, which can be partially influenced by the larger community and society and their reactions to losing a pet. Now, I'll go into both of these. Number
Yeah.
one, our animals, whether they are actually pets or in the case of people who do animal welfare, strays, uh, we care for them, they occupy a very central part of our lives. The bond that we share with them is very deep, and in one sense the codependency that we have with them is a very special quality. uh, Losing this type of an animal can be absolutely emotionally devastating, yet as a society and in many cultures we don't recognize how painful this loss can be. Now, one of the reasons is it's such a deep loss is because the first thing you hear about a pet's or an animal's love, that it's
Yeah.
unconditional, it's accepting, and it touches every part of your life. Just the way that your dog looks at you, maybe you're so used to certain patterns in your everyday life that the moment I go to get my shoes, my dog gets excited. So it's so much a part of your daily patterns that it
Yeah.
can hit you in very deep ways. They're looking at you all the time, they are responding to you, they are responding to your moves, they are part of your daily lives. And of course,
Yeah.
we are caretakers for them. So this
Yeah.
really multiplies the intensity of the loss that we feel.
Yeah.
The other thing is that it changes our routines, whether it's going on walks, whether it is feeding the animal. Now I have two alarms that go off on my phone at 10:30 a.m. and 10:30 p.m. to feed thyroid medication to the dog. So at
Mm-hmm.
10:30 I'm always in a particular place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for the last 6 or 7 years. Now that
Mm-hmm.
changes all of a sudden, and your body may not even realize, you may not realize, and you may go to the drawer to get the thyroid medicine. And
Yeah.
then the loss hits you all over again. It causes a ripple effect. The responsibilities you had when you looked after your animal, or say for example your cat, if you're cleaning the cat litter, when you wake up in the morning to feed, so that disrupts your daily life. I mean, for a dog owner, it completely changes the idea of coming home. Coming
Here
home is
I would like, yeah, here I would like to interrupt and ask a very simple question. When it
Hmm.
comes to taking care of a family member, we are equally involved in our family members also. If we have sick member, if we have old member in the family, we are already involved and we are doing all these things for them also. But what makes it different when it is related to pet? It is the dependency that for everything they are totally dependent on us.
They are totally dependent in a different way than a human being would be, because it is
Mm-hmm.
up to you to gauge their health. It is up to you to realize, okay, the dog hasn't eaten the full meal today, or oh, the bowel movement isn't all right. With a human, you
Yeah.
ask,
Yeah.
usually, unless the human is extremely ill. So in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, you're constantly your dog's advocate, and you are uh, taking more of an active role. The animal does not have as much agency as it would.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
dependency is a very unique one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's a very unique bond. You are advocating for your pet, and of course, apart from being part of your life so much and being dependent on you, we do depend on our pets for companionship. We do depend on them to kind of ease our
Yeah.
daily troubles, and of course, they've seen us through many hard times in our own lives, probably,
Yeah.
right? So then if you face a loss, um, and this is very well documented,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the loss isn't considered similar to how you would experience a loss with humans. And in fact, there is a judgment of the
Yeah.
of the larger community about a human's loss versus a pet loss. And in
Mm-hmm.
that case, the human loss is seen as a valid experience of grief. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, when you lose a human, you have people calling you up, you have rituals, you have other things that you do, social rituals, you have social support, all that is normal, but it may not
Mm-hmm.
happen so for pets. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, when we lose a pet, it is a family member, it's your best friend, and the loss may be extremely intense, maybe affect us for a long period in our time. The whole process of mourning is different because the loss is not seen as valid
Yeah.
as a loss would be for a human.
Yeah.
And so then when people are not able to acknowledge, when people around you are not able to acknowledge the loss that you go through, there are no
Mm-hmm.
rituals to help us mourn the loss of our animals.
Mm-hmm.
uh, the grief may be overlooked or laughed at or completely dismissed. So
Mm-hmm.
those are much harder things than to deal with. And what makes it worse, unfortunately, is if you anticipate that reaction and do not share with other people.
Yeah.
And quite a few people do anticipate that someone is going to say, "So what? It's just an animal," or "So what? Get over it."
Yeah.
So then, you are actually perceiving, you are actually getting more distressed when you share. And
Yeah.
so that makes grieving an animal uniquely harder.
Mm-hmm. So
And
when we talk about, yeah, so when we talk about there is one very common statement that always a pet owner would use, and that is absolutely relatable, that no one can understand what pain I'm going through. Okay, even though you are a pet owner, you have multiple pets at home, I have multiple pets at home, but still I cannot relate to the third person's pet's loss, because they share totally different kind of relation. And I strongly believe that every pet is a special for that entire family, and the
yes,
pet also holds different chemistry with each family member, even the guest, even the routine guest that keeps visiting at the family. So that they share very different types of behavior and types of chemistry with each and every individual person. So when the person says that no one can understand my pain, what I'm going through, the difficulty, I saw my father crying, I saw my mother crying, I saw my dear friends crying, I saw my vet crying, because it's not just a family loss, but when we were going through that particular time, uh, it was absolutely difficult, and everybody was so emotional. And people know me as that I'm more expressive. And my sister, on the same day, or maybe next day, she said, why don't you write something? So my reaction was, I don't think I'm still able to do that. I don't think if this is the right time, because people can be so judgmental that it's not even 24 hours, and you're directly on the social media, you are posting picture about it. So sometimes, so for people like me who express it in a lengthier way also, sometimes my posts are very long also. uh, there is no need to be judgmental about it. Sometimes the people, because we cannot connect with a similar thought process people, so sometimes the social media is the ultimate way, because we have hundreds of people who are pet owners, and somehow they can relate to our loss. So do you feel that expressing an emotion when you lose your pet is the right thing to do, and people should not fear about people, what people will say, what the society will say, what their friends will say? So
so
as a mental health care expert, and as a pet owner, and as a pet professional, what is your opinion on that?
I I think, first of all, it's very important to say that there are no rules around how you feel grief. There is no right or wrong way to feel grief. And so, to everyone who's listening out there, I hope that you are never judgmental about anyone's grief. Do try to
Yeah.
check yourself if you feel the need to say that. I think expression, whether it's writing, whether it's talking, it could be drawing, it could be dancing. I think expression could be a critical way to explore that grief. We
Mm-hmm.
have to find outlets for it. And
Yeah.
so it could be expression in any way. And as for not worrying about others, I think that's great if it's possible for the individual person to do so. What I do
Mm-hmm.
feel worried about is there are people who get worried about judgment, people get worried about other people's reactions, and then so
Yeah.
they themselves internally feel ashamed at the sense of
Mm-hmm.
grief. That's number one.
Yeah.
They judge themselves. And number two, of course, they are not willing to share because they are scared of other people's reactions. So that is
Yeah.
what I would be more worried about. And so I think it is important for everyone to create a sense of community and safe space and acknowledge that grief. But there are people
Mm-hmm.
who could really be affected by a judgmental attitude or dismissing their grief
Mm-hmm.
over the loss of a pet, which is the more dangerous thing, and which is why people don't share or don't express. So I do think
All,
not expressing at a certain point could be not great for someone's mental health.
all right. So before we move ahead with our next question and the next segment of the topic, I would like to tell our all our viewers who have joined recently that today's topic is how to deal with the grief of losing a pet, and we will be talking about how to cope with that loss, how to cope with your emotional needs, your emotional trauma, and we are going to talk through mental care point of view as well as pet professional point of view as well as pet owner's point of view. They say, I have people saying, I have heard people saying that it's okay. You lost one dog, but you have two more dogs. You have three more dogs. So, is there any difference between um, a first-time pet owners and a seasoned pet owners? A loss is a loss. Death is a death, and there is no replacement. So from mental care point of view, how you see that particular statement when people
So
say such things that
first, I have to answer as a dog owner myself. I don't think any loss can be comparable to the other. It does not get easier. It is not the same. With each pet you may have had in your life or each animal you may have had in your life, the equations are completely separate. You connect with them on a whole different level. So no, actually I don't think it gets easier. And sometimes it can sound ridiculous, right? The
hmm
idea of, imagine if you had ever said that to someone who had three kids, it's not okay.
it's not okay,
So, huh.
absolutely.
But in terms of course, first time pet owners losing a pet, there are pet owners who have taken the loss very badly and then who have said that I can't handle such loss again, so I will not keep another pet. Now, that
Yeah,
might be best for their own mental health and they're setting the boundaries accordingly. So, that does tend to
yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, but then do you think that's some of the time being reaction when people are not able to cope with that trauma, and they don't want to see themselves. It's not about, it doesn't, after the pet has gone, it's not about it doesn't remain about the pet, but it's more of what type of trauma I am going through, and I don't want myself to go through that again. I don't
Yes.
want to face that sadness. I don't want to face that the entire emotional turmoil. So that
Yes.
can be a time being a reaction or temporary feeling. But do you suggest that when such things happen, do you think that getting a second pet, not immediately, but in after some days, after some months?
I think One is, I will trust people the most with their own feelings and setting their own kind of mental health boundaries. So if they
Mm-hmm.
feel that that kind of trauma is not something that they can cope with again, and you will see this in different types of loss. Now, say for example,
Mm-hmm.
heartbreak. How often do you hear that I'm not going to enter into any other relationship again because this relationship is over, and this was the one person that I loved, and this is it, this is the end.
Yeah.
And so there is always the possibility, but I think what I would want to be careful about is
Yeah.
if you try to get a second pet or another pet, a new pet, all of a sudden, and then expect that you would have the same patterns or the same kind of equation or the same kind of dog or the same kind of cat all over again.
Yeah.
um,
So
so
then in this particular part, there are different scenarios and there are different structures also that I would
Mhm.
like to discuss,
Yes,
because we have multiple structured families also. So there are first time pet owners, there are families with kids, there are families without kids.
yes,
So and in every structure, or every scenario, the chemistry, the relationship, then the intensity, then the emotional involvement, everything changes. So when it comes to
yes,
kids, because kids are very sensitive to these particular topics, sometimes they cannot relate to what has happened. That
yes.
in Hindi, we always, or in Marathi also, we used to say that okay, भगवान के घर चले गए, or
Hmm.
देवाघरी गेले. Okay, so
Hmm. Hmm.
these things you really can't express uh, to your kids. So then how you do, what would be your suggestions for these families?
Right. So, first of all, I'll say that losing an animal for a child is different than losing it for the adult, simply because
Mm-hmm.
a child has a very unique bond with the animal in the home, usually. One is
Mm-hmm.
that the children often turn to pets for comfort, as a friend. Pets are also easier to talk to about things they may be scared of, about certain emotions. And here I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking not just from research, but also my own uh, personal experience. When
Mm-hmm.
I was a child, and my first dog was my best friend. Anything, if I was scared about failing in an exam, I would sit at night next to my dog and tell my dog and cry. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a very unique bond. It's somewhat different than the bond an adult can have with a dog. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
for a child of a certain age, it's possibly their very first caretaking experience.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a very different bond. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. And
Mm-hmm.
it could be, in many cases, a child's very first experience with death,
Yeah.
right? And so it's difficult for them to understand. And usually, what I tell people is that if your child is of a certain age, is old enough, then it's best to be honest. Don't confuse the child. The child may wonder that, is the dog resting? Is the dog sleeping somewhere? Don't say something like the dog has gone to live elsewhere.
Uh-huh.
In case the child is wondering that the dog can come back or the cat can come back. How the
Mm-hmm.
situation is managed really is going to depend on the child's age, but you always
Yeah.
must keep in mind that the child is going to have a very different equation with the animal. So younger
Yeah.
children may not have the understanding, and then you can say devachi ghari gele, ya whatever it is in Hindi.
Yeah.
um, but they will miss the animal. They'll
Mm-hmm.
ask you where the animal has gone, and if and they will be aware that you also get upset. Don't forget that your children are reading your own face, your own expressions,
Yeah.
your own emotions. So that's
Yeah.
something that you must be aware of.
Yeah.
Older children will understand more,
Yeah.
and they will ask you questions about what has happened to him now, how will he live. And those can be hard when you're upset, but I think it's important for older children to answer openly and honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Then it comes to, actually, as an adult, it's your responsibility to watch out for the child, because they will not be able to tell when their grieving is becoming more of an issue that they can't handle. So,
Mm-hmm.
first off, allow the child to freely express what they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And for this, you can really use drawings, you can use writing, maybe you can create, like, do an arts and crafts project, draw pictures
Mm-hmm.
of the animal, create a scrapbook. And there's something very therapeutic in that. And it could be not just for the child, but it could be for the adult as well. And of course, in this case also, if you have kids in the equation, be careful about getting a new pet quickly, because again, the child is going to think it is just a substitute, and then it's not fair for the
Yeah.
child, it's not fair for the animal.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my sub question to this part is also there. We have a lot of families where the pet is performing as a therapy dog, and because that is a primary need for the kid, because of the kids, some of the mental health care issues, and that pet has come into their life with a lot of thought process, lot of training, a lot of money has been involved, and now the kid is totally dependent on that dog. And when such things happens, the family, the adults can be the secondary, the people to get
Support.
affected,
Yes.
but the kid will be the primary person, primary individuals who get mentally affected on a uh, very tragic
Fundamental
note,
level.
and
Yeah.
on a sudden also, because sometimes the adults are ready to face this loss, but the
Yes.
kids are never ready. So in those cases, what would be your suggestion?
I would really, each child is going to grieve differently. So there are some roles that that dog would have been performing in the child's
Mm-hmm.
life. There are some roles that the dog would have been part in the child's daily routine. So one is to recognize that that whole routine
Yeah,
has kind of been disrupted. What are you going to do
yeah,
in place of it? How are you going to substitute? How are you going to create a space for the child, one, to
yeah,
experience the grief? There is no
yeah,
way to get around this loss or to experience it. You have to
yeah,
allow yourself or a child to be able to experience it if you are going to deal with it and resolve it. So one is
mm-hmm.
to give the space for that, but also acknowledge that routines have changed. You may need to evolve some new support systems for the child. Now, whether it's going out to visit other people's dogs, who then may provide that same sense of, okay, this is just a warm ball of fur that I'm going to play with, or a ball I'm going to throw for this animal.
Yeah,
Those are things that you will have to look at and figure out how to do for the child, while giving the child space to grieve.
yeah. So we have Devashri Kulkarni saying, is it because we have a dependency on our pets on emotional level too, that it gets harder for us to come out of the grief? I think somewhere humans are more dependent on their pets. I was totally dependent. I hate to say the word was. I still feel that Millie is still around. I know that I should accept the fact that she has gone, but it is so much into my routine. Just yesterday my parents had come, and I opened the door, and all three dogs, Myra is also at home currently, so all three, they just went out of the main door, and like like a normal way, I just called everyone that Millie, Maya, get in. So I'm so used to using her name in my day-to-day life still. And then I realized that okay, now she's not there. And again, I had that downfall. Again, I was a little emotional. But then these my cartoons, they keep me busy with the antics. So rightly Devashri said that yes, emotionally we are very much dependent on our pets, majorly for their psychological health, mood upliftments. Yes, definitely they do support us emotionally, and yeah,
And
this is how it
I,
is.
what I was going to say earlier is that this loss may feel even more acute during COVID, because literally our pets are taking the burden of being
Yeah,
sometimes the only other kind of living beings around us, fulfilling our needs for touch, for comfort. So it is, pets do give us a lot of emotional
yeah,
support. And
Yeah.
just the name will give you the clue. A while ago I looked up the word pet.
Yeah.
It originated in 1530, and it means a favorite child or a favorite animal, someone who you may hand raise. And of course, the other more technical term for pet is companion animal. So you have all the cues in that name. It is an animal who is literally your companion.
Yeah, yeah. It's a kind request to all our viewers. Please do not hesitate to ask your questions. This is the platform where nobody will judge you, nobody will laugh at your emotions. So just in case, because today's session is for all these pet owners who are dealing with their loss, and we have first question from Prachi. She's asking what can be the support system for adults to deal with the grief.
Okay, so I'll talk about first just dealing with the grief, and then I'll talk about maybe what others can do or who you can rely on.
Yeah.
So, first of all, there are no rules around grief. You may feel it for years, you may feel it acutely for a few months. There are no rules around it. There are some studies that have been done, not that many, but as per the studies, the symptoms of grief, at least when it comes to loss of a pet, uh, persist on average up to a full year at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
So recovering from this or dealing with it requires us to recognize that there are going to be these daily changes in our lives. That's one. Two,
Mm-hmm.
we do need to seek social support from people, and especially if you have people who you know will understand and sympathize with our emotions and not judge us, all the more better. Now there are certain kind of usual things that you may need to deal with sooner than later. For example, reorganizing routines and daily activities.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going on a walk every day with your pet and that's your form of exercise and your pet isn't there anymore, eventually you are going to have to reorient and figure out a new way. Or for example, for someone like me, I go out and I take my dog for a walk, and that's how I meet everyone in the neighborhood. Everyone in the neighborhood knows me. So how does my social interaction change if my pet is not there anymore, right? The other thing is recognizing coping with this pain or this grief can often feel very overwhelming. And at this point, people may experience extremely difficult and confusing emotions. One of them, and there is no, lots of people talk about there are some stages of emotions. I want to say that that's something that was developed for people who are suffering from cancer. There are actually no rules. You may feel this in different times, you may feel emotions all at once together, but the emotions that people are likely to feel are shock, anger, isolation, alienation, denial, guilt, which is a very important one, which we will talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
And this will may affect your physical health. It may cause problems eating, sleeping, carrying out daily tasks. You may experience aches or pains. Um, and these are not feelings that these are feelings that unsettle you.
Yeah.
uh, but it's very important to give yourself the time to grieve, because you've lost someone very special, and missing
Yeah.
them is natural. And sometimes it can feel very lonely if you don't share. So it's important in terms of support to take the time to talk things over. Your emotions are not your enemy. Don't feel ashamed, don't feel embarrassed. Tears are part of the healing process for many people. If you don't cry, that's absolutely okay too, but expressing in some way or another is something that I would strongly encourage. And
Mm-hmm.
there are moments like how you were talking about, Meera, that all your grief is variable. There are moments in which you are feeling stronger, you are feeling better, and then there are other moments in which you all of a sudden realize. And so it's important that in that moment you give yourself that time to grieve, sometime every day, as long as you need to. Don't run away from it ever, because there is
Yeah.
no right way or there's no wrong way. And of
Yeah.
course, grief can fade with time, and everyone will deal with the grief differently. And
Yeah.
hopefully, gradually, it will get easier. There are things
Mm-hmm.
that uh, people can do to support you. And
Yeah.
what are the supports? So one is, you should genuinely acknowledge the pain that the person is feeling at the loss.
Hmm.
You should not be minimizing their feelings, giving them things to do, say go look at a pet or go find another dog. Don't say all of that. Their
Yeah.
sadness and loss is important. And allow them to express their feelings, talk, cry about the pet. Um, sometimes some people find some kind of uh, peace in doing some rituals. Now I know that someone actually went all the way to Goa and buried their dog's ashes in Goa and had a Christian burial ceremony. That's
Yeah.
perfectly all right, because that was an important relationship. That was such an important part of your life. Why would you not use a ritual? These are rituals that
Yeah.
help us mourn. They help us grieve. So if a ritual helps you, please go ahead and do it. And ideally, hopefully, you will find people to support you in that.
Yeah.
I also want to say that for supports in terms of friends and family, it's very important to check in on the person who is grieving. You have to use
Hmm.
your knowledge of them. There are times that this person may not realize that they need the support and they need the help. So it's very important for others to support them through this. If need be, refer them to a counselor. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
So since you're talking about, you spoke about the rituals, I
Hmm.
would like to tell our viewers that Millie is my first dog, and with whom I lost just couple of few days ago, a month ago, and physically she is resting at my facility. So emotionally, mentally, physically, I always see that okay, she's around there. And for years, I have been planting a tree in every pet's memory. And there are couple of pets who are my family friends, my dear friends dogs, my clients dogs. Some of the pets are resting at my facility, and in every pet's memory we have planted a tree on the same spot. So the rituals that you spoke about, it's very important. People, we also need to know that what type of facilities we do have to perform those rituals. um, and if you are doing it rightfully, you are the best pet owners on this earth. Don't leave your pet after they are gone. So the rituals are really important. We have next question from, before we move ahead, we have just one question from Anuja. So she's asking, how can I ensure my equation with a new pet doesn't get affected, because at the back of my mind I'm still grieving the loss of the previous pup. In our case, it was a foster puppy who passed away. We are going to talk about it, and definitely, Anuja, we will take that question definitely. Because these topics are definitely lined up, and I'll just take you little further in our discussion. So the next part is, mm, losing a pet all of a sudden at a young age, and losing a pet at an old age. At old age, somewhat, when Millie got diagnosed with cancer 3 to 4 years ago, I was preparing myself since that time that that the time may come at any time. I have to
Yes.
be prepared. When I say that I have to be prepared, trust me, we are never prepared to face that moment. But still, we need to talk about it, because the amount of pain everyone goes through is totally different. So the sudden death, when the pet is just 2 years, 3 years old, it's a young dog or young pet, not just dog but any pet who is not in that age to go. When we say that it's too early to go, sometimes it happens out of sickness, sometimes it happens a natural death, sometimes due to accident. So how they are different from one another?
So, one is, I think there are some emotions that you may feel more when you are grieving, if it's a sudden versus expected loss. Now, in terms of expected loss, uh, part of you could even be relieved that the animal isn't suffering anymore, and that's perfectly okay. Some people feel relieved that the animal isn't suffering, or the, the weight of caretaking, and it could be a long caretaking period that has all of a sudden gone. You could feel relieved at that the animal isn't feeling pain, but then you don't blame yourself. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some guilt around that. There is also people do experience more guilt when the loss is sudden, especially if it's from something like an accident, or maybe something medical that happened all of a sudden. Was I not enough? Did I not take enough care? What did I do? The other feeling that people may experience is anger,
Mm-hmm.
and it is part of the normal process of grieving anger, but just be careful that you don't take it out on maybe the vet.
Yeah.
I would like to believe that all the vets do their absolute best when it comes to saving an animal. That's why they got
Yeah.
into the profession. So
Yeah.
these two emotions especially are, I think, the harder ones to deal with when there's a sudden loss.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually sudden losses are also when animals actually may not have died, because of course
Mm-hmm.
grief and loss aren't exclusive to death and dying. This can
Yeah.
also happen when a pet gets lost or goes missing. That's what I mean, actually,
Yeah.
when a pet goes
Yeah.
missing, or
Yeah.
when like a stray that
Yeah.
you're taking care of goes missing. Now that's something that we call
Yeah.
an unresolved loss, and
Yeah.
that's actually very significant, because
Mm-hmm.
then you are faced with unanswered questions. How could this have happened in 4 days, or where has this dog
Yeah.
gone? So in that sense, finding closure is very hard. So in terms
Yeah.
of an expected loss versus unexpected loss, finding the closure is really hard. So in addition to all the sadness, I think the feelings that will probably be most intense are guilt and anger. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, if the pet has gone missing, there may be great fears for the pet's well-being. If you don't know where it is, you don't know how it's managing to survive. You could feel anger at someone who maybe left a door open, or if a cat has run off during Diwali time, you may feel anger at yourself for having left the window open. So all of these are manifestations of grief, and it's a
Yeah.
very particular type of grief and an extremely stressful loss because it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
Finding closure is very hard, and again, this is the time when you others around you have to be careful, because
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that loss all of a sudden may tell the other person that everyone around me has given up looking for this animal, especially
Yeah.
when it comes to missing animals. So this is a point where I would be a little careful.
Yeah.
And even if you yourself look for closure, it does not mean that you have given up on the animal, but
Mm-hmm.
closure is important.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. So I guess we also spoke about young versus old age.
Hmm, hmm.
So young dogs who goes without without any reason. Sometimes I don't want to bring out that topic, but sometimes a
Yes.
dog who has gone for a neutering process just because
Hmm.
a dog is sensitive by heart or sensitive by nature, and sometimes they cannot cope with the anesthesia,
Yes.
and they just and for this particular loss nobody is ready. And lot of time as a pet professional, I also used to work with a veterinarian, and I
Mm-hmm.
have multiple veterinary friends also. So I have heard people talking, I have heard veterinarians also talking that it is very easy to blame us that we killed their dog. Nobody in the pet profession is sitting with a knife to take away someone's life. We are into this profession for a purpose, for because we love them, because of our passion. So definitely, as a pet owner, people can relate to your pain, people can relate to your loss, but always in that process also you have to be very careful about expressing that you are not holding somebody, because calling someone a killer may kill that person from within. So if somebody is calling me a killer, that you are a killer, you are a murderer, you have killed my dog. Okay, so at a time, three people are going through different pains. So as a pet owner, we have to be very careful while putting that blame on somebody also. Sometimes it is, that's how it is.
Yes, yes. And again, anger is a natural part of grieving. But hopefully, there are people around us at that time who will remind us that vets and anyone else who you may blame is only human, and being humans, that we do make mistakes sometimes despite the best intentions. So
Yeah.
that's one. And the second thing, I do want to talk about this very briefly. It's not directly connected, but
Mm-hmm.
a veterinarian's mental health is deeply impacted. When they lose patients, when they have to euthanize a patient, and vets are at very high risk of, say, for example, suicidal ideation. So it is something that one must be
Yeah.
careful about. There's no getting away from the anger. So it's better to have support systems. It's better to express, maybe even reach out to a
Yeah.
counselor. But it you
Yeah.
should take a little care where that's concerned.
Yeah. We have people writing really long, long comments and long, long questions. We have Mitali Shrotriya saying, I have faced the same. My lab is 14 and a half years old now. Bless you, doggy. He has hip dysplasia, cannot walk at all. He has heart enlargement, due to which he has difficulty breathing and swallowing. He has a bump on his head, which may be a tumor. He got skin infection as he's on the as he's floor bound and pees that way too. Although we are taking care of him the best we can, we are finding it difficult to see him suffer so much. We are trying to keep it routine as much normal as we can, but trust me, it is not easy. Uh, she wanted to write something more, but uh, I think the
There's
comment.
one
Yes,
question on
definitely.
multiple pets. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here Devashri also is asking, when you have multiple pets at home and unfortunately you lose one of them, there are multiple ways for humans to vent out our emotions and grief. We can talk to other people, we can write it down, but how should we identify and deal with the emotional trauma other pets are facing because after losing their friend?
Hmm.
Are there any signs that we should take a professional help for pets too? I can very well relate to this question asked by Devasri, because when Millie passed away, I saw drastic changes in Maya, my golden retriever, because she grew up around her for six years. They have the 6 years of companionship they had, and very simple routine that during the feeding time, Millie used to get first and Maya used to get second. Their sides of meal bowl sides were also the fixed, that Millie will get on the left side, Maya will get on the right side. So she refused to eat on a first serving. So I had to bring my cat in, I had to bring Mahi in. So she will remember that pattern, that okay, somebody is still there to eat before me, and then the second serving will be mine. That was the first thing. Then I have seen her licking her paws excessively whenever she's awake, and if I'm doing my work. It's not that they used to play together all the time. It's only when Maya used to be in the heat, at that time only they used to play, but rest of the time they were just staying together. So I have seen these things happening, and then I started taking her more frequently to the kennel. But again, it's a COVID situation, the restrictions are there, my work commitments are also there. People can relate, but they don't want to relate. They want their work to be done on priority basis. So I was finding it very little difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah, these things happen.
Yes. And I mean, I shall I chime in?
Yeah, 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 please talk.
So uh, first of all, I want to say that there are some listeners who may wonder that do animals feel sad? And in fact, animals do grieve. In 2018, I don't know, many of you may have read that there was an orca whale that
Mm-hmm.
everyone was paying attention to because she carried her dead calf for 17 days,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
long morning ritual.
Yeah.
And of course, I think so many people who are listening to us today have either read about Hachiko or seen the movie. So there is a lot of research that shows that grief can be observed across species and across
Mm-hmm.
dogs, cats, elephants, crows. Elephants actually smell the bones of other dead
Yeah.
elephants.
Yeah.
Crows make sounds and gather around dead crows. So
Mm-hmm.
actually, there's been some study done on this, and I think the best study showed that about two-thirds of pet dogs experience loss of appetite and lethargy when
Mm-hmm.
another companion, an animal companion, dies.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be some behaviors that you would observe as Mira has observed,
Yeah.
and of course that does relate back then to the change in routine, the loss of familiar activities, and let's not forget, if you've been listening to me, it's the same way in which the humans are also experiencing, right? Loss of
Yeah.
familiar activities, changes in routines. So you must be mindful of
Mm-hmm.
this. Animals have deep, complex emotional lives, so be mindful of that. And also, feel free to reach out to an animal professional and talk about it and maybe come up with some ways to help your own pet. And I have done this for multiple people. But
Yeah.
also recognize and remember that when you are around your animal and you are overcome by grief, it may further affect your dog or your cat. So, you
Mm-hmm.
recognize those changes in routine. And if you are not up to playing, if you are not up to walking, if you're not up to doing the things with your dog, get in someone else who the dog knows and trusts to please partake in these rituals, do these
Yeah.
sorts of daily things so that the dog isn't or the cat isn't further affected by your grief.
Yeah. All right. So I guess Devashri, you have got the answer, and I saw one question from Manita, and we are now going to talk about it. Is the euthanasia? Uh, Euthanasia, in my personal opinion, it's a good way to stop the suffering, uh, to give a dignified life and dignified death to an animal. Uh, but again, when it comes to a pet owners, a veterinary can suggest that now there is no comeback. We have done everything, and now there is no comeback. So euthanasia is something that people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear about it, and they don't want to. In other words, in a common man's language, they don't want to kill their pet. So when it comes to euthanasia, what are your views?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to what happens when we get a pet home. The
Mm-hmm.
day we get a pet home, we take on a very complex responsibility to take care of the animal, to protect the animal, and to be there for the animal in each and every way. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there may come a time when the animal becomes very sick, is unable to kind of live a quality of life, and in that
Mm-hmm.
case, it is an unavoidable duty to do what is best for the animal. That's
Mm-hmm.
despite the heartbreak it may bring to us personally. So, for me,
Mm-hmm.
if you're thinking about it very carefully, if you're looking at quality of life, if you are looking at whether the animal is enjoying being around you, being living,
Mm-hmm.
um, then and considering euthanasia, if the quality of life isn't there, then for me, the euthanasia is actually a very profound act of love, care, and responsibility. It is a
Mm-hmm.
moral decision. It is a very hard decision, and
Yeah.
it's very hard to deal with. I mean, I have cried over that table many times. uh, Now I've euthanized three
Yeah,
of my
I remember.
dogs, and it's you have to do it because that is what is best for the animal. And there are times when we can be too emotionally involved to make the right decision, and sometimes it'll come to us. For one of my dogs, he had kidney disease. He was doing well, he was pulling through, and then finally he had a seizure. And I saw him having a seizure, and that night I think I cried a lot because I realized, okay, the next day it has to happen, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you may not be ready. You should lean on your vet, definitely, because your vet can guide you through this. But I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that the act of euthanasia is an act of love, because you are putting your loved one out of pain.
After working in this industry over now 14 to 15 years, I have my old time clients whom I used to train, and now those pets are 10 years old, 11 years old, and sometimes those clients, they do call me that X is not doing well. He had stopped walking. He doesn't get
Right,
up. So
right.
sometimes as an animal professional, as a behaviorist also, it's not just that we teach the dog to sit and down. We connect with the family. We are connected with the dog also, and we share an emotional equation with the entire family, not just with the dog. So it is our duty also to guide them that when to stop the suffering, because
Yes,
sometimes they want to take that decision, but they are mentally, they are not strong enough to
yes,
decide whether it's the right thing to do. They live, uh, they hold themselves responsible for that. They feel guilty about it, that how can I take such call for my own pet?
yes,
Who am I to decide to end someone's life? So it's definitely, it's a difficult thing. I'm feeling heaviness on my on
yes,
my heart currently, because it's very difficult to talk, because it's for Amelia also. I had to take that decision, and when she was cancer positive 4 years ago, I spoke to my parents. I spoke to my sister also in Germany, and I said that the day I feel that she's suffering, the day my veterinarian says that now there is nothing can be done, there is no comeback from this journey, uh, I don't want my dog to suffer.
yes,
It's not that I'm not ready to put in my life, put in my efforts to make her comfortable. I don't mind caring for my pet, even if the pet is bedridden. But then, what kind of life, quality of life, when we talk about
yes,
quality of life, what kind of quality of life we are going to offer to our dogs?
yes,
So, taking that decision 4 years back and implementing it on that particular day, it was absolutely difficult, and I was lucky to have such fantastic support of my friends who came during that time. uh, Srinivas, my friend from Mumbai, he drove down in the evening, same day in the evening. So definitely taking this call is not a selfish thought. You
no,
are allowing uh, your pet to go in a most respectful way. As a mental health professional, if somebody is feeling guilty about it, or somebody is not ready to take that decision, uh, what is how will you help them convince that let the pet go?
so you're absolutely right. The predominant kind of feeling that one feels around euthanasia is a feeling of guilt. And part of that is related to the fact that you can be very upset or guilty because you are uncertain about when is the time to let go. Now, your example that you have given me is absolutely beautiful. You kind of prepared, and then that really helped you. It was a
Yeah.
support in and itself. because your road was then clear. uh, and it's to deal with the guilt. I think you have to keep on telling yourself that you must step beyond your own feelings, and you're doing what's best for your pet. It's normal to feel guilt. I'm not saying that people shouldn't feel it. You will feel it, but just know that it is absolutely routine to feel that guilt, because in the end you had to take that decision. But it
Mm-hmm.
is a decision of love. It is a decision to give dignity to the animal. And why would you want to then put that animal through it? So I would again uh, use these rituals. So for example, you had friends come, then you
Yeah.
have Millie's resting spot in your kennel.
Yeah.
If you can't have the resting spot, have something else. If you don't have access to like a place to plant something, for example, I have my first dog's medical file. Now that is he died in 1998. I still have the file. I still have his collar. I have all of my dogs favorite collars that they're kept there. Whenever I want to pull them out and look at them, perfectly okay. So think about the
Mm-hmm.
ways in which you want to memorialize also your
Mm-hmm.
pet. Um,
so
but yeah,
that so that so nothing wrong in taking that call, and sometimes it is best to give that decision making rights to the veterinarian also, because things that they can see we cannot see, because we
yeah,
don't want to see beyond our emotions, beyond our relation with our pet.
yes,
And so in case if you are taking any call for your pet, if you have decided, if you have already done that, and if you are still feeling guilty about it, please do not feel guilty about it. You have done the right thing. I have done the right thing to stop the suffering. Oh, and
I mean the other thing
because
is that
yeah,
depending on the situation, you
yeah,
have realized that this has happened and you will need to take that step. The veterinarian will tell you whether you can prolong this for a day, and at that time,
yeah,
you can do things. So, for example, I spent all night awake with my dog, and you may choose to feed the dog his favorite food. You may have people visit the dog that the dog loves. So, you can do these rituals even before going through with it, depending on what the veterinarian says.
yeah. So nothing wrong in that. And now we have our time constraint also. So we are now moving to our next and final topic of when when do you think that a pet owner should take a professional help for themselves when they are in that trauma, and they are not able to cope with that, or when is it what are the signs to decide that okay, now I should, or now my member, my family, or my friend should visit a professional and sort this out?
Okay. So, this question for me is hard because I'm going to say that you should go to a therapist irrespective, or you should
Yeah.
do things for good mental health irrespective. And I know that I do. So, when I was saying that loss isn't necessarily about dying, I actually had two sessions with my therapist about, I think, 3 or 4 months ago, because my oldest dog is very unwell and she's an extremely active dog. She was an extremely active dog. We used to do things together all the time and play a lot. And now she's essentially in her bed all day. And so that was very hard for me to take. And so I did have a couple of sessions with my therapist, and I think that helped me cope with it better. Nothing in the situation has changed, but it's helping me
Mm-hmm.
cope better, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing. I would always suggest that. The second thing is, and it's related to then the people around you. Hopefully, you have people around you who can help you, who can listen to you non-judgmentally, who can give you like some practical help. I think I noticed another question. So, for example, if the person is having trouble doing daily work, so get some food for them, help them clean up the house, uh, maybe help them with some other duties that they may have. But when you do all of that, it's also very important to keep an eye on the person, and
Mm-hmm.
because you know the person well, suggest, maybe if you feel that they are really struggling with it, that they should reach out to a professional. Grief
Mm-hmm.
counseling is very important, and
Mm-hmm.
it gives people a therapeutic space to mourn your loss. Okay, so I think, uh, how do I put this in a way that is easy for people to understand? So
Mm-hmm.
I think the best way for me to say is that, say, for example, if you lift a table every day, and one fine day, all of a sudden, the table becomes too heavy to lift on your own, and you think you need an
Yeah.
extra hand to support you,
Yeah.
that's when you should reach out to
Mm-hmm.
someone and ask for maybe professional help.
Mm-hmm.
So something maybe in
So
your
the so
daily.
there is so there is no fixed time duration for this, that wait for 10 days, wait for 15 days, wait for a month or two, and then reach out. Sometimes if the reactions or if the emotions are too high right from beginning, and if those are not going down by any chance with time, because as
Yeah,
we say that time heals everything,
yeah.
but if it is not healing, then what are the some common signs that you will suggest our viewers to notice, that if
So,
you see this, then please reach out for the help.
grief over losing an animal can be so different, Mira. I can't even tell you. So when I lost my first dog, I was 18 years old, and I really thought that I was going mad,
Mm-hmm.
because I would go to sleep every night, and then I would wake up in a panic because I would hear his claws on the marble floor.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would think that I'm hearing him drink water, and I would put on the light
Mm-hmm.
in panic. And that's
Yeah.
actually a normal part of grieving. You actually think that the animal is there. Um, it may disrupt your sleep patterns completely. It may disrupt your food patterns completely. You may not be able to do what you want to do in the daily course of your day.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you should reach out. If you feel like you are isolating yourself, can't handle even talking to other people,
Mm-hmm.
reach out.
Mm-hmm.
If you are feeling immense amounts of anger, again, reach out. You also, for a lot of people, they don't forgive themselves when
Yeah.
it comes to death. Now, it could be a sudden death, it could be a pet getting lost. And when you're
Mm-hmm.
also unable to forgive yourself, that's when I suggest you do reach out. But essentially, anything that you would want to do that you are not being able to do in a daily course of your life, you should reach out. So
All right. uh, I hope and I believe that we have touched this topic, and we have done some amount of justice to the topic, and covered maximum important points in this. When Rana had called me to discuss about this, I remember while talking on the phone, I broke and I started crying. And when we decided, I remember you asking me that, Mira, you really want to do this, it is too early, but definitely yes, taking this session, it has helped me, and definitely this is helpful for our pet owners also. Thank you so much, Raj, for joining us on this live session. um, I I agree that in today's session there are multiple pause and some silent movements, but I hope our viewers will forgive us and they will excuse us for this.
yes,
uh, I would like to thank Dogspot team also for bringing this topic, because nobody want to show their emotional side, uh, because they are scared, and they are not scared, but they are not ready
yes,
to accept
people
what
do
people
feel
will
that way.
say.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
exactly.
lot of time we feel and we think that what others will say. So
Yes.
I'm happy that Rana and team Dogspot has they have gotten this subject on a live session, and they gave us opportunity, because I'm the um I don't want to call victim type, but I can definitely relate to this topic because I'm still going through that process. We are pet
Lived
owners on
experience. It's called lived experience. That's what we say in mental
yeah,
health.
yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, viewers, for taking the time to write beautiful comments and beautiful questions and opening up with your emotions. In case if you want to reach out for any further help, please, this is the helpline number, and you can always contact Raj Mariwala for that for this particular subject also. So
Okay. Thank you so much, Meera. I truly, this is subject that you have just gone through. It's close to all of our hearts, and yet it's so important to talk about.
yeah,
And
so
thank you,
thank you.
Dogspot.
Yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, we are signing off.